I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Where is Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff? Apparently, nobody knows this, according to a new report from CNN, but this silence has been terrifying to those in Donald Trump's camp because they haven't had communications with Mark Meadows, and they think they should be having communications with Mark Meadows. So did he flip? Is he cooperating with Special Counsel Jack Smith? Is he just staying under the radar? Well, those in Donald Trump's camp thought when they paid over $900,000 for Mark Meadows' legal fees to his law firm that was representing him, they thought they'd have communication. They thought they'd have cooperation, but they ain't getting it, at least according to this report by CNN. The headline of this CNN report is pitiful, but if you actually go into the body of the report, it has some real substantive information about whether or not Mark Meadows may be cooperating with Special Counsel Jack Smith. The headline of this article: out of the spotlight, Mark Meadows wields quiet political power amid Trump legal woes. And in reading this article, it claims that Mark Meadows declined to comment. Me thinks that's not the case. I think that Mark Meadows probably contributed to this on background or off the record. But let me point your attention to the critical portion of this article. No one really knows what he's doing, the article states. A source close to Trump's legal team said Trump's lawyers have had no contact with Meadows and his team and are in the dark on what Meadows is doing in the investigation, fueling speculation about whether Mark Meadows is cooperating with Special Counsel Jack Smith's probe, or if Meadows himself is a target of the investigation. The silence from Meadows has irked lawyers representing other defendants aligned with Donald Trump who have been more open, according to several sources familiar with the Trump-aligned legal teams. I guess by open, they mean traitorous. In particular, they point to a $900,000 payment Trump's Save America Political Action Committee, by the way, which is being criminally investigated by Special Counsel Jack Smith, a $900,000 payment Trump's Save America Political Action Committee paid to the firm representing Meadows. The law firm is McGuire Woods at the end of last year. Quote, "We've all heard the same rumors," one Trump advisor told CNN. Quote, "No one really knows what he is doing, though." The article goes on to explain that the Justice Department decided not to charge Mark Meadows with the crime of refusing to testify before the House January 6th committee last year. And in its final report last year, the January 6th House Select Committee said that Meadows appeared to be one of several participants in a criminal conspiracy as part of Trump's attempt to delay and overturn the results of the 2020 election. The report paints Meadows as an integral part of that effort, as documented by the more than 2,000 text messages that Meadows turned over to the committee before he stopped cooperating. And you may recall that federal Judge Beryl Howell ordered that several of Donald Trump's top former aides, she compelled them to testify before the grand jury in Washington, D.C., that is investigating Donald Trump's crimes. And mostly all of those aides have now testified. We've covered them here at the MeidasTouch Network. We've talked about everybody from Dan Scavino to Stephen Miller to Nick Luna and others who, since that order by Judge Beryl Howell, they've testified. And that basically leaves one or two others, but that basically leaves Mark Meadows. So this is what the Justice Department has been doing, how they've been building this case, and why Mark Meadows has likely not gone before the grand jury yet. And so The way the Department of Justice prosecuted these January 6 cases, they started at the bottom with people who trespassed but who weren't violent. They then climbed to the people who were violent. They then climbed to the people who were very violent. They then climbed to the individuals and the terrorist groups engaged in seditious conspiracy. And those seditious conspiracy charges have really been rarely brought and rarely successful in the history of the United States by the Department of Justice. But the Department of Justice has had a great deal of success getting seditious conspiracy convictions against the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys in multiple federal trials there. And what was the main defense of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers as part of their seditious conspiracy defense, where some took the stand, others didn't? But what was their main argument? Their main argument was Donald Trump told us to do it. You're charging us with this seditious conspiracy, but you should be charging Donald Trump. So you start building this case. You get all of these seditious conspiracists to say that Trump was involved with them as part of their defense. They lose. They're found guilty. You now have all of their statements. And a lot of them were communicating through intermediaries. And who was the main point of contact? Well, Donald Trump doesn't use a cell phone, and Donald Trump doesn't own the electronics. Who was the main hub of the conspiracy on January 6th? It's Mark Meadows. So I have no doubt that the Department of Justice has informed Mark Meadows that he would be a likely target, or at least by implication, he's aware that he is a target of seditious conspiracy, which carries with it a 20-year sentence, obstruction of official proceedings, which carries with it a 20-year sentence. Mark Meadows could be looking at life in prison. And the fact that the Department of Justice has had all of these successful prosecutions, they're in a position of strength. And Mark Meadows' lawyers at McGuire Woods, who took that $900,000 from Trump's PAC, I'll tell you, they're smart for taking the money up front, and it's a smart group of lawyers there. I would be shocked if they are not telling their client the right legal advice. They're not Joe Tacopina. They're not Evan Corcoran. They're not Alina Habba. They're not Christina Bobb. It's a serious law firm, McGuire Woods. And they're telling Mark Meadows what the charges are, the success that the Department of Justice will likely have. So Mark Meadows is intimately aware of that fact. The silence by Mark Meadows and the rumor spreading that he may have flipped and that he's cooperating does indeed make sense. Now, Mark Meadows invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in connection with the Fulton County District Attorney's special purpose grand jury. He tried to avoid testifying. He was compelled by a South Carolina court to have to testify there. He testified, but he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. But, I think the reason why the Department of Justice did not prosecute the contempt of Congress charges against Mark Meadows is it's a misdemeanor. 2 misdemeanor counts. Sentence would be under a year. And I think the Department of Justice is using that as leverage in their discussions with Mark Meadows and saying, look, we could charge you with that. But the stakes are far higher here. We're talking about seditious conspiracy. We're talking about obstruction of an official proceeding. We're talking about all these other felonies. We're talking about life in prison right here, not 2 misdemeanors. So here's the thing. So Mark Meadows could request some sort of limited immunity. He could, say that he wants to cooperate. He can be given what's called derivative use immunity, where he's compelled to testify before the grand jury, and anything derived from his testimony. If he commits perjury, he can still get charged for that. But anything derived from that testimony, he can't be criminally charged with. But the Department of Justice has all the goods before even that grant of derivative immunity, should they choose to give Mark Meadows derivative use immunity at all. The DOJ may not want to give Meadows derivative use immunity. I'm sure they have all the remaining text messages. Remember, Meadows turned over those 2,000 or so text messages to the January 6th committee. He was being cooperative, then stopped cooperating very suddenly. And then I believe one of the Trump political organizations donated money to a group affiliated with Mark Meadows around that time. So Mark Meadows was like, I'm not cooperating anymore. He ran out the time. He filed a federal lawsuit against the January 6th committee. He lost the federal lawsuit, but ran out the clock there despite the January 6th committee's efforts, because the power in the House of Representatives switched hands and the MAGA Republicans took over and they shut down any remaining investigations by the January 6th committee. And the MAGA Republicans now sing songs with the January 6th choir and they release songs on iTunes. That's how pathetic and pitiful that is. But the ultimate question now, though, is that what's in the remaining text messages? And that's information that Special Counsel Jack Smith already has. I don't think Mark Meadows has any basis to block any of that stuff. The Special Counsel Jack Smith has those remaining text messages, has those remaining emails that the January 6th committee doesn't even have. So the Jack Smith may be like, we don't even need to grant you. Why would we even grant you immunity? You're a target of our investigation. If you cooperate with us, we'll give you leniency and we can give you a non-prosecution agreement. You know, that's a possibility. But this is key, folks. Stay tuned to what's going on in Mark Meadows. And built into this puff piece about Mark Meadows, which it seems like he engineered part of the puff piece, which says Mark Meadows wields quiet political power. I'm not going to read you the rest of that article where it talks about how Mark Meadows is still running the show in the House of Representatives, even though he's not there and he's telling them what to do. It's pathetic. And my own view is that's probably coming from Meadows off the record or on background. He's probably a source in this article. But the other part right there that I read for you is coming from Trump people, who are trying to send a message to him through this. So that's, to me, the key ingredient left on Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into the January 6th related crimes. Now, Special Counsel Jack Smith pretty much has wrapped up the investigation into the crimes of Donald Trump's theft of the thousands of government records. And I think we see an indictment there actually relatively soon, relatively in legal terms, but I think that's wrapped up. So stay tuned on the Mark Meadows front, but that's actually big news buried in that story. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. We are on our way to 1.5 million subscribers. Thanks to your support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch, and wherever you get audio podcasts, subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast. Have a great day.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.